I think you're muted, Wendy.
This meeting is being recorded.
Great. I think we're going to get started. I hope everyone's joining right now and they're able to hear, see us. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to just get started right away because we want to use this time wisely. Again, my name is Wendy Serrano. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm PBOT's Equity and Inclusion Manager. I will be your moderator tonight. And as a reminder, we are recording today's meeting. The most important point I want to make is really that we expect everyone to be respectful. Only speak when you are called upon during the question comment portion of the meeting. Do not unmute at any point during the presentation. Let me tell you that the first half of this hour will be to cover and address what advisory shoulder and bike lanes are. So we will have a presentation from two of our colleagues. The second half of this hour is to give as many of you an opportunity to address comments and questions. And due to the size of our attendance, we will time 2 minutes per person in order to voice your comment or question. We will be recording them and we will follow up with answers on the project's website within a week or so. We will also be tracking all of the comments as well as the questions to make sure that people understand that we received comments, not just questions. Now, I wanted to review some settings to make sure everyone can participate fully. At the bottom pane of your screen, you should be able to see a little microphone icon. You can mute and unmute yourself on that feature. But again, we ask you to keep yourself muted unless you're called upon during the question comment period. And then next to that microphone, you have a video icon, a little camera, and that's to stop video or start video. Now, if you keep going, there's a chat feature. And I want to point out that Sean Canny, my colleague here, will be helping us track comments and questions. So let's say that you hear someone's comment that really resonated with you. Instead of repeating that comment, just please send a message to Sean and say, I agree with that comment, or you can even write out the comment if you wish. But that way we can track how much support there is for a question or a comment, and we can make sure we allow as many of you to raise as many viewpoints or perspectives that there are. Now, I want to also call attention to the 3 little dots on the bottom of the screen. If you click there, you can actually press reactions, and reactions is where you have the feature to raise your hand. So that's going to be very important when we get to that common question period. That's all I have on some of the settings that I hope we can utilize for this. Again, ground rules: be respectful, only unmute and speak once you are called upon during the comment and question period. And as a warning, if you use language that is violent, threatening, innuendos, or comments that are foul language, you will be removed from the meeting. So just want to make sure everyone keeps this respectful. And again, thank you for being here. I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Roger, if you could take it away now.
Great. Thank you, Wendy. And thanks everyone for being here. My name is Roger Geller. I'm the City of Portland Bicycle Coordinator. I use he, him pronouns. And I'm going to just kick off a brief presentation before we talk more specifically about the advisory lanes. Before I start in, I also just want to give my other colleague, Anthony Butzek, who's going to be helping me with this presentation, an opportunity to introduce himself. So please do, Anthony.
Thanks. Yeah, good evening, everyone. I'm Anthony Butzek. I'm a senior traffic engineer with PBOT. I'm overseeing the advisory shoulder and bike lane projects and evaluation for PBOT.
Great. Thanks, Anthony. So before we talk about the details of advisory bike lanes and advisory shoulders, it's really important that we put into perspective why we're modifying the roadway to make it safer and more comfortable to ride a bicycle and walk. So I'm going to talk very briefly about those whys. And then I'll also talk a little bit about the hows, about some of the things that we, PBOT, do to create those safer and more comfortable conditions. I'll also talk a bit about what our experience has been with increasing bicycling in Portland and how it's helped to minimize driving and automobile congestion. Then we'll take the bulk of our time today to talk in more detail about advisory lanes and to hear your thoughts, answer your questions, and have a respectful conversation about this. So the short bureaucratic answer to why we're working to create better conditions for bicycling is because it's city policy. But that's just the bureaucratic answer. The main reason we're promoting bikes is because we're working to minimize climate change, to improve safety for all road users, to create opportunities for increased health, and to design the city in a manner that best accommodates the population growth that has occurred, is occurring, and that will continue to occur. There's two principal policies in the city's comprehensive plan that relate directly to creating good conditions for bicycling. This is one of them, and then this is the other one. They're both more or less in service to this policy, which directs us to dramatically reduce driving. So that's official city policy. We are working to reduce driving. Why would we want to reduce driving? Well, one reason is that transportation is responsible for more than 40% of the greenhouse gases that are emitted in Multnomah County, and cars are the principal source of those emissions. So if we are going to fight back against climate change and work to minimize the fires, floods, powerful storms, heat domes, and all that comes with a warming planet, then we need to dramatically reduce the greenhouse gas emissions coming from our vehicles. It's a city goal to have driving represent no more than 30% of all trips, and that's less than half of where we are today. But it's not just about climate change. It's also about safety for all people on the roads. So Portland has committed to the Vision Zero goal of eliminating traffic deaths and serious injuries on our streets. We have a lot of work to do. We know that traffic deaths are strongly correlated with the number of miles being driven. That's not surprising. It's also why reducing vehicle miles traveled is a key goal for improving safety for all people in the roadway. To put traffic deaths into perspective, this is how it compares in Portland to homicides, mostly gun homicides, for the period 2017 to 2021. These are the average number of annual deaths for each of those 5 years because of traffic and because of homicides. That's the annual average. We also know that exhaust from cars and trucks makes asthma in children worse and may cause other respiratory illnesses and heart problems resulting in deaths. In 2010, there was a report issued by a group called the Health Effects Institute that demonstrated a causal relationship between pollution from motor vehicles and impaired lung function and accelerated hardening of the arteries. The Health Effects Institute is jointly funded by the Environmental Protection Agency and the automobile industry. The biggest effects occurred among people who lived within 300 to 500 meters from highways and major roads. This applies to about 30 to 45% of the population of North America. What you see in this slide are major roadways in Portland, regional traffic ways, major city traffic streets, collector streets. And this slide shows a 500-meter buffer from those major city streets. So this is another reason why we're working to reduce the miles people travel by automobile. Last but not least, in the city's rationale for reducing driving is the idea of livability. So this slide shows Powell Boulevard. We're all probably pretty familiar with Powell Boulevard. It's a very busy road in some parts of town and not quite as busy in others. At its busiest, it carries more than 40,000 daily car trips. The city of Portland is growing. We can expect hundreds of thousands of new residents in the coming decades. If everybody who comes to live in Portland drives at the level we currently drive, then we would need the equivalent of 23 more Powell Boulevards worth of roadway capacity just to tread water with where we are today. We'd need this just to stay at the current levels of congestion, or actually the pre-pandemic levels of congestion. We want to make sure that everybody can get around town. We want people to be able to get to their jobs, to parks, to school, to restaurants, to movie theaters, to churches, to doctors' offices. We cannot afford to build 23 more Powell Boulevards worth of additional space for driving. And I wonder if any of us would really want to live in a Portland that accommodated that much driving. So we've got to do something different. By policy, bicycle transportation is intended to account for about 1/4 of all the trips that we make. We've been focused on building a bikeway network since the early 1990s. In 1990, this is what our bikeway network looked like. The blue lines are bike lanes, the green lines are neighborhood greenways, the magenta lines are off-street paths. By 2000, this is what the bikeway network looked like. This is what it looked like in 2010. And we continued adding to it over the years so that today it looks something like this. And we've really seen a positive response to our efforts of building a transportation system for biking. In 1990, the overall bicycle commute rate was low. It was roughly comparable to what you see in other cities across the US. This is what it looked like in 1990 by census tract. Most of the bicycle commuting was inside that red circle, which is about 4 miles from the Burnside Bridge. The dark lines that you see show the bike facilities that existed in 1990. Even by 2000, the level was still low, less than 2% citywide. However, just 10 years later, it had expanded quite a bit to 6% citywide. Notable was how high it was in areas close to the central city. In some neighborhoods, the rate was greater than 20% of all commuters. That growth continued up through 2014 and 2015, when bicycle commuting at the city peaked at about 7%. Bike commute rates in East Portland were comparable to what they were in Inner Portland in 2000 at that time. So this slide shows those census tracts where bicycle commuting was at least 4.5%. You'll note that part of the Hazelwood neighborhood had elevated bicycle commuting by 2015. And this is based on data that was available to us in 2017. It shows that well more than half of Portland's commuters lived in areas where the average bicycle commute rate was about 10%. So what does that mean for congestion? Well, this growth in bicycle commuting is really important because during that period, the number of Portland commuters grew by almost 55,000. If those 55,000 new commuters that we saw by 2014 got around town the same way they did as we did in 2000, then there would have been 41,000 more cars on the roads during commute hours. But because we built bikeways and got more people biking, the number of new cars on the road only totaled about 15,000 out of that 55,000. You can see from this graph that the growth of more than 18,000 new bicycle commuters was the biggest factor in reducing the potential for more cars on the road. And that growth really continued up through 2018, meaning that bicycling was the means of transportation that has done the most to limit automobile commuting among Portlanders. So building a high quality bikeway network is really essential to creating those conditions where people feel safe and comfortable when biking. And our preference on busier streets is to build bicycle lanes that have physical separation between where people bike and where people drive, like this example on Northeast Halsey, and this one on its partner, Northeast Weidler. And this newly completed one on Southeast Division. Or we try to do wide buffered bike lanes, like this one on North Williams, or even just conventional bike lanes, like these on Southeast 130th. Or we work to build neighborhood greenways, like this segment on Northeast Oregon Street. But in circumstances where the roadway is too narrow for bike lanes and the speeds and volumes are too high for shared lanes, then the advisory lane is a useful tool. We also like the advisory treatment on those types of roads when otherwise there's no place for people to walk, like in this photo. So let's talk specifically about advisory bike lanes and advisory shoulders. And to do that, I'm going to turn it over to one of our traffic engineers, to Anthony Butzek.
Thanks, Roger. Yeah, this is Anthony. So I want to start by just kind of laying out what these are. At PBOT, we call them either advisory shoulders or advisory bike lanes. In other places, they're sometimes called edge lane roads. They're all essentially the same thing. They're defined space for people biking and for pedestrians in some cases. They use dashed lines to define the lanes. They allow vehicles to enter those lanes in order to pass oncoming vehicles. They're installed on narrow streets where there's not enough space to accommodate all of the features otherwise. And when there are no sidewalks, we call them an advisory shoulder because they're going to have bicyclists and people walking. And in PBOT, we're going to use the signs shown on the right with the bike seal pads to indicate to people that there could be pedestrians in the street. When there are sidewalks, we call them advisory bike lanes. That's why we talk about advisory shoulders and advisory bike lanes. They're typically used on lower traffic streets, up to a maximum of about 5,000 cars per day. Next slide, please. And just a short video or figure here that's going to talk about how they work. On low traffic streets, wide bike lanes are added where they usually wouldn't fit. Drivers from both sides use the center lane to travel. Drivers move into the bike lanes to pass each other safely. Bicyclists have the right of way, and the vehicle returns to the center lane when safe to do so. And pedestrians may use the bike lanes when they're, in cases where there are no sidewalks, the vehicles would yield to them as well. So one of the questions we hear a lot is the bidirectional vehicle lane safe? It's counterintuitive to many people. We want to point out that we already have bidirectional lanes throughout the city on hundreds of streets. We usually call these queuing streets. They have parking on both sides. They have one vehicle lane down the middle. Drivers have to negotiate space with each other within the street and other users moving over to the side to let oncoming vehicles pass. Advisory shoulders and bike lanes use the same concept, but with the advisory shoulders or lanes in place of the parking lane. And there's an example of that photo that was of a queuing street. Some of the reasons that we are doing these, they're a cost feasible way to add access for people biking and pedestrians. And that's probably reason number one. They do keep two-way traffic for vehicles, which is often desired. In some cases, they allow us to retain parking that we otherwise wouldn't be able to retain. We know they've proven safe in dozens of cities. There's some evidence that they may slow down traffic on the street. We'll get more into that. We did our homework before we installed these. We evaluated traffic volumes and speeds on the prospective streets and compared those to prevailing standards or guidance. We looked at other installations in the US and other international cities. Canada is one. We traveled on the prospective streets. We coordinated with Portland Fire and Rescue, TriMet, who both use these streets, and Federal Highway Administration. And we will be evaluating, in partnership with Federal Highway, we'll be evaluating the before and after traffic volumes, bike volumes, and traffic speeds, as well as user behavior on these streets. So some of the things we learned in our research is, as of 2019, there were about 30 advisory bike lane installations in the US or Canada. They all had a daily traffic volume of up to 5,000 vehicles, so that's sort of an upper limit. They had posted speeds of 25 to 30, and they had a street width too narrow to fit standard bike lanes. 6 of those completed evaluation studies, and each of those 6 found either a reduction or no change in the crash rate, either a reduction or no change in motor vehicle speed, either a reduction or no change in volume, and some mixed results with respect to bicycle volume changes. So generally seeing either a minor benefit in each of those or sort of neutral. And the figure on the right shows the federal highway guidance for when this treatment is appropriate, generally looking at a range of the vehicle volumes and the speeds. And so we're utilizing that guidance to select sites. We have 3 so far, Northeast 43rd in the Hollywood District, Northeast 53rd near Providence Hospital. And both of those are advisory bike lanes because the streets already have sidewalks. And Northeast San Rafael between 111th and 122nd. And that one is an advisory shoulder. That street does not have sidewalks. Many other cities have advisory bike lanes, as we mentioned, and you can see the list of some of them there. They include some large cities like Portland, such as San Francisco, Chicago, and Minneapolis, also a number of smaller cities nationwide. PBOT sent over 8,000 postcards, installed lots of posters along the streets, and we're going to show you a list of some of the things we heard and talk about these questions. How do I use the street? How do I navigate the intersections? What about speeding and dangerous behavior by other drivers, particularly with a bidirectional lane? Why build these lanes when we don't have many people biking on them? Why not build sidewalks? And why are we doing this now? So the first one, how do I use the street? The intent of the design is that vehicles drive in the center and move to the right when another vehicle approaches. So that car is doing what it should. It's within the dashes. If an oncoming vehicle is coming, it'll move into the right in the bike lane, as shown there. And if there are bikes or people walking in the advisory lane, those yield to those people. How do I navigate intersections? Just like with any intersection, use caution and be ready to yield to other road users. Just noting that at busier intersections, a center line will be added, and you'll see those at any stop signs or signals that you encounter driving on one of these. So what about speeding and dangerous behavior? As noted before, in other cities, the advisory lane design led to equal or lower speeds and equal or reduced crash rates. There are two documents that we're aware of that studied advisory bike lane sites that in North America. The Mineta report is the most comprehensive. It looked at 13 sites in the US in multiple years, and based on those, it estimated a typical reduction in crashes of between 7 and 44%. So we would call that a significant reduction, but not massive, but maybe a little safer, and not a single head-on crash at any of the 13 sites over multiple years. The Alta report looked at 10 advisory lane sites in the US and Canada, and each of those sites, there was not a significant issue with crashes that was reported. Some of them reported improvement. Most of them reported no significant change. And just to note that, all of the other sites we're aware of are posted at 25 or 30. PBOT intends to post each of our advisory shoulder lane streets at 20 miles per hour. So we're wanting to encourage slower speeds through neighborhoods to maximize safety. Why bike lanes with so few cyclists currently using the street? And that's a good question. We hear it a lot. That we're trying to create access for people biking and for people walking. Without comfortable and safe facilities, we know that few people will choose to do so. Why not just add sidewalks? The honest answer is we would love to add sidewalks. The cost to add sidewalks is very expensive. It's about 200 times the cost of striping. And so advisory shoulders provide the pedestrian and bike space until the funding becomes available for sidewalks. And why now? Certainly we have a desire to add the pedestrian bicycle facilities on the streets that lack them. We have many of these streets. We can't wait until we can afford sidewalks in all of them, because that's going to be a very long time, although we still intend to do that. But we're also working in a partnership with the Federal Highway Administration to install and evaluate projects that make sense in Portland. So next steps, after each project is installed, here's some of the things that PBOT is going to do. We're going to observe how the road is working, including in-person visits. This also includes collecting video data and analyzing that to observe user behavior. We're going to conduct post-project traffic studies that include that analysis of the video data, as well as collecting data on speeds, on volumes. We're going to track crash data. We're going to solicit feedback from the community, and we're going to report back to the community about what we find. So in terms of where we're planning these around the city, we are planning some additional projects. And Roger, if you can click once more. We're looking at four more advisory shoulder sites on streets that lack sidewalks and bike lanes. North San Rafael, east of 132nd, Southwest Talbot, near Fairmount, Southeast Alice, between 84th and 92nd, and Southwest 40th, which is just south of the Barber Transit Center pedestrian bridge over I-5. We're also considering advisory bike lanes. It's a street that already has sidewalk on Northeast Sacramento, between 132nd and 148th, alongside some other options as well on that street. That's one option under consideration. Before we install new advisory shoulders or lanes, the community can expect notification at least 6 months in advance, opportunities to provide feedback and shape the project outcomes, and information. I think this is really important, information on how the existing projects are working in Portland. We have 3 of these now. We're already collecting data. We're starting to look at that data and we'll be able to report back. So at this point, I will turn it back to Wendy.
Thank you, Anthony, and thank you, Roger. So now we're going to open our comment question period, and fortunately we got 35 minutes, so a little bit more than half the time. Again, I will ask you to please use the feature of the 3 dots where it says more. You'll click there and you can raise your hand, and that way we can call on you, and we'll get going. I actually, let's see, I'm having a hard time seeing people's hand. Actually, Sean, could you call on people? I can't actually see who raised their hand first.
Yes, absolutely. Keith.
Thank you. I'm a Southwest resident and certainly intrigued and encouraged by this concept. I think probably the concerns I have is how will it work safely when we have weather like we have now? It's dark early, it rains a lot. Motorists are going to have potentially headlights coming at them. So then they think, okay, I'll move over to the right, but they may have difficulty seeing people who are in that advisory or bike lane or shared shoulder area. And so that's probably my biggest concern. The second one is for Southwest Talbot. You do have some significant queuing for cars that are going to the 4-way stop at Patton. And so if the advisory shoulder is supposed to extend all the way to Patton, I think you're going to have some problems during the PM peak, because you're going to have cars in a row to get through that intersection, and then that whole concept would probably fall apart. But I think the big one is, how's this going to work when the conditions are the worst, when it's dark and it's raining and people are trying to deal with the headlights coming at them and not being able to see who's in the advisory bike lane or shared shoulder area. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. And we're gonna try to get through questions unless Anthony and Roger want to address questions as we go.
Yeah, it's up to you. I mean, we want to hear the most. I think, just quickly, I think those are good comments. The darkness issue obviously is a safety concern, regardless of the street configuration. Our initial inclination is that this will make it better, not worse. And I think I'll leave it at that so we can hear more.
And I'm going to go in the order that it appears on my screen. So Dina, I see your hand up.
Yes, thank you. So my first question, and I hope I get to ask more, but I will post them in the chat if not. There is no provision, and correct me if I'm wrong, there is no provision for cars driving in bike lanes with ORS 811.440.
Thank you, Dina. We're going to get to another question and then see if we can answer several questions in a row. Sean's recording the questions, so you will also be able to see answers to questions on the project website within a week from today, where we'll be able to post comments and questions, just so we can get to as many of you as we can. Again, 2 minutes per comment or question, and now we'll go to Amanda.
Thank you. I currently live on San Rafael, where the new bike lane has been installed. And I had contacted Scott and asked for specific data that was used because San Rafael was labeled as a low traffic street, which I disagree with. I think if there would have been more information put out ahead of time, I would have gladly volunteered to put a traffic strip. At this point, I would love to have it returned. I hear honking all the time. I have delivery drivers, new ones asking me if it's a one-way road now. And and honestly, I appreciate that the city is trying to go to assist in reduction in climate change. However, as a single mom with 2 small kids, I'm never going to be able to ride a bicycle with 2 kids and groceries and getting into downtown with the time constraints that I have, even with buses and trains. So while I like the idea, I just want to give a point that it's not feasible for everyone to get on a bicycle and get where they need to go. I guess that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. And now we're going to go over to Nick Burns.
Hi, I'm Nick. I live in Northeast. First of all, I want to say thank you to everyone who has helped and continues to help to make it better to bike in Portland. My comments are generally directed toward the specific area of 53rd where it crosses I-84. It's like my primary means of going north-south in Portland on my bike. And I feel like that small section, especially going south, is less safe with the current treatment. Like biking south in that area creates a situation where you have people overtaking you on your left while you also have cars pulling out of Hoyt, and sometimes people are really impatient there. They pull like super far out into the intersection because of limited sight lines. And like previously I would just take a lane. It was, you know, a little stressful, but generally worked out okay. And now since like there's this lane there, there's this expectation from motorists that you're like in that lane, and you know, I'm just sort of like anxious about future real bad interactions I'm going to have with drivers there. I just want to, one last thing. Like, I feel like as a cyclist, I am like more brave or stupid than most people. So like, I'm going to keep biking through there. But for example, like my wife, my friends, other people that I bike with, they need like safe, protected areas to bike in. And yeah, I wish that there were more concrete protected bike lanes without flex posts with like real concrete protection. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you, Nick. And now we'll go to Keel. Oh, you're still muted.
Hello, my name is Kyle Johnson, and I'm the chair of Bike Loud PDX. First, I want to thank PBOT and everyone who's tuned in. I think that civic participation is one of the biggest reasons why Portland is such a great city to live in. Before the San Rafael advisory lanes went in, I was a advisory lane skeptic. But since they've gone in, I am an enthusiastic supporter, and I'm very eager to see what the full report from PBOT says about it. We rode out to the advisory bike lane this past weekend, and everyone was really impressed by drivers driving a lot slower and dangerous conflicts being mitigated, people paying a lot more attention. These advisory bike lanes seem like they work, and they seem like they work really well. As a parent of a 4-year-old, I would not have wanted to ride a bike on San Rafael with my kid. With the advisory bike lane, I think I would go out of my way to use these facilities. And there are so many other streets in Portland that need these advisory lanes. And I think that if the report shows safety improvements, we need to implement a citywide advisory bike lane plan so that we can quickly implement this feature around the city, especially since the places where these can go in are some of the most important for addressing transportation equity. Thank you for listening to the community today, and I hope we can move forward quickly to use these lanes and make Portland a safer place for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. And Marty?
Hi, I'm working right now, but I wanted to jump on. So my comment is for the San Rafael. So I live in Park Rose, and I'm also a single mom of 2. I moved here from Minneapolis because it's bike friendly. And so one of the things that we did in Minneapolis that was really great is having more like sidewalk usage, which I feel a lot safer doing. So where we are, we're on 117th, and I like to get my kids to bike to Winco with me. And we actually used to just take the side roads, even though 122nd has the bike lanes. It's just still really scary because that road in particular is very high traffic and people still speed. But the San Rafael, what I would recommend, even though you guys said that it's like more expensive to do sidewalks, is that even all, I'm like part of the PTO and everything in the community in general, is a lot of people don't even walk in like that area because there are not sidewalks. Like we want to like go walk to the coffee shop, or we want to like walk anywhere. And like walking through all of those roads is just scary in general. So honestly, like I almost feel safer on my bike because like I'm going faster, but it's just interesting that that's one of the reasons why we aren't doing sidewalks, is because it's more expensive. But honestly, I feel like it's worth the investment because then it would get people to even walk around rather than feeling unsafe. And so even with the mom who said she lived on San Rafael, I think she could agree too that having more sidewalks available, because if we just made sidewalks that had bike lanes on it, then like I feel like everyone would just feel safer. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Marty. Now we're going to go over to Jim. Yeah, that's you, Jim. Jim Chas. You're still muted though.
Okay, sorry, my mouse was on something else. I couldn't unmute. A couple of quick questions for Roger or Scott. I couldn't find any information anywhere on what the traffic volumes were on San Rafael from 122nd to 148th, and I understand that it's one of the few streets that we have in Northeast Portland that goes through, and from 122nd to 132nd, I believe, there are stormwater facilities in the street and available to put bike lanes. So I'm questioning why we would do the advisory bike lanes in that particular place. And then you said this was part of a repaving project, and I'm sorry, maybe I'm not up to speed on this particular project, but if you repave from 132nd to 148th, how far would that cover? And because there are no sidewalks, this is completely an experimental process, and we need to have some data to back up what PBOT wants to do. So if I could get some vehicle counts, because I don't see why it can't be a standard bike boulevard from 132nd to 148th. I think the traffic volumes are lower there, but I think we're being shortchanged by just putting in the advisory bike lanes and not really completing the street, because it is a neighborhood collector, and anywhere else in the city, a neighborhood collector would have sidewalks. So, and I'm not opposing the advisory bike lanes, but I'm asking for some more information.
Thank you, Jim. And Scott Cohen just shared the link where you can find data from the vehicle counts, but he's happy to provide additional if needed. And now I'm going to go over to Bjorn.
Hi, good evening. I'm Bjorn Warlow. I live in Northeast Portland. I had the opportunity last weekend to go out to San Rafael and ride on the advisory bike lanes. I saw a lot of people walking and biking out there, which I thought was good. It seemed like some of the drivers were unclear on how to use the new facility, but it also seemed like they had slowed down quite a bit. So I'm really looking forward to seeing the data around this. I guess one comment I would have to the city is that, one option, if, especially if neighbors want a more expansive treatment like sidewalks and bike lanes, is to assess the neighboring properties and upgrade the street. And that is one way to raise those funds. Thanks.
Thank you. And we'll go to Sarah now.
Hi. Yeah, I'm near San Rafael, so 111th and 122nd is what I'm concerned about in particular. And usually when I am on that street, there's two-way traffic basically every time, and we're just in the bike lane of necessity. I also, at least once a day, it seems like there's people that don't know how to use that center lane, and that they're supposed to yield to the person on the other side, and they just keep charging on. So you have to end up on the other side. And I mean, obviously enough near misses like that, people will get a clue, hopefully, and, go to the right. But right now, like I moved in 2009 and I never felt unsafe on that street. And now I feel unsafe on that street. Basically every time I'm on it, I'm worried about what's going to happen to me. Also, I also have two kids. We can't just hop on a bike and go somewhere. We have a tight schedule like everybody else. We need to be somewhere. We need to be there, soon. And not allowing that. I mean, I'm kind of concerned actually that this is our goal, is to reduce driving and dramatically reduce driving and reduce, vehicle miles traveled. Like everybody's got things that they need to get to. And I think it would be better to look at, more electric vehicles, there are other ways to reduce that carbon footprint rather than just forcing everyone onto bicycles, because there's a lot of people who can't get on bicycles. And, you're making people very frustrated, frankly, by slowing people down when you can't slow down. You just have to, there's so many things that need to go, like the single moms here. I mean, there's so many things that you have to, and everybody has those situations. You can't just hop on a bike. And so I sympathize. The other thing is that in particular in that area, I see people all the time with dogs, with, older people with strollers, and you can't expect those people to just go out on the street. No one's going to go out on the street with their dog or their stroller, their little kids, and fight cars and bikes. That you can't expect them to do that. Like there should be sidewalks. I always see people, sidewalks would be used. I never see bikes, and I'm not questioning that there are bikes out there, but I never see bikes when I'm on that road. I always see us, obeying the striping, which is ridiculous. So I'm sorry. That's my feeling on the subject.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you. And now we'll go to Eduardo.
Hi, good evening. I live between Halsey and San Rafael on 140th. And San Rafael has been my regular bike commuting route when I travel to work at PCC. So that's our route. And prior to the advisory lanes, I had consistent negative interactions with vehicles driving on the road, especially approaching intersections, especially intersections like 132nd and San Rafael, where it narrows and there's no shoulder. So I had to take the full lane. So having to deal with angry drivers beeping at me. And just that's like a consistent thing. So it's been a big improvement for me personally to be able to feel safer and knowing that I have those advisory lanes. So that feels great. So thank you for that work, and thank you for that improvement. I think our neighborhood in the Russell neighborhood has been car focused and car centric for so long that this transition is going to be difficult, especially thinking about like how far away everything is. I know that right now, my wife and I have been considering, like we're a one car household right now, and we've wanted to just adopt e-bikes, but the lack of infrastructure and the general vicinity, like outside of San Rafael, it feels really unsafe. So that's one challenge, and is keeping my wife, and like we have two young kids. We're willing and interested to try cargo bikes, but just don't feel safe right now because of because the focus of transportation infrastructure has been vehicles. So I think that this is a positive step, and I'm grateful for this step, and I look forward to seeing how things evolve. And I mean, I teach geology, earth sciences at PCC, and I recognize the importance of reducing car use. So I think that that's something that, like, this change is not going to be won't be easy, but we all need to find something that works for us. So I think I just wanted to put that out there. We can't afford to continue on relying on cars in the way that we have been up until now. So having a car-centric society hasn't been working. So just wanted to say that. So thank you.
Thank you, Eduardo. And now we'll go to Clay.
Oh. Say Clay.
Hello.
Correct. Go for it. Clay Centro.
Hi, thank you. Yeah. You know, I have a sister-in-law who lives in the Netherlands. I came to visit for the third time this summer. And when you're there for even a short time, you see what society can look like when we decide to prioritize people over vehicles. And that includes public transit, but also, you know, ubiquitous bike lanes everywhere means that a lot of these, you know, standard talking points about people not necessarily being able to bike really vanish when you have wide accessibility. You see a lot of older people, folks, you know, in their 70s and 80s biking around, and it actually ends up being a, you know, much more economical and convenient form of transportation for them in many situations, not all, but certainly I think there's sort of there's a cart and a horse thing here, obviously. If you look back in the 60s, early 70s, you know, Amsterdam was like a typical American city choked with cars. There's a really amazing YouTube channel called Not Just Bikes, where a guy who lives in Amsterdam covers all this transportation policy stuff and cycling infrastructure and why there are no stop signs in the Netherlands and things like this. And you really see that it's about a transformation that happens when society decides to prioritize a different way of transit. And I think we can do that here in Portland. And certainly, I think you will find that the more you look at people who do, for whatever reason, need to drive, which is obviously the case for a certain segment of society, the more people you take off the road, actually the easier it becomes for them to drive, because they're not competing with other cars. There's less traffic, less congestion. But right now, you know, cars are a major negative externality, you know, both in the form of climate change. We saw a couple summers ago when it reached like 115 degrees here. Terrifying. We're going to see more of that. It's not going away. We're reaching a tipping point. And we really need to phase out this notion of the way that we get around is in these big metal boxes with wheels. It's just not working. And while I think electric cars are marginally better, they still have, you know, very close to the same number of total negative externalities as a combustion engine car. Cars don't just emit carbon dioxide. They also emit particulate matter from tires and brake dust. They kill pedestrians. They kill children. The numbers on this are horrifying. And I think we need to bear that in mind when we think about the ideas of alternatives like electric cars. They don't just eliminate the negative externalities of vehicle ownership. And one last thing is that we massively subsidize cars by allowing free parking. So you know, parking is not a public good. It is not, it is an excludable thing that we could actually charge for. We could privatize. In Japan, for instance, you cannot park on the street. You pay for a parking garage, you know, privatize that cost, and society does not pay it. And so, you know, when you take that into account too, the total amount of negative externalities around cars are really quite massive, regardless of whether they're internal combustion engine or electric. So thank you.
Thank you, Clay. And now we'll go to Peter.
Hey, I just want to make a general comment to start. I currently live in inner Southeast, but a lot of my friends have been priced out, unfortunately, and have moved to farther out neighborhoods in Southeast or Northeast Portland. And a lot of them have gone from biking pretty regularly to not really feeling safe or comfortable biking anymore, which is really sad. And when I go to meet up with them at their homes, it's really not a comfortable or safe experience often. So anyway, specifically related to San Rafael, I actually went up there to bike and check it out. And honestly, it did feel a lot more comfortable to me as a cyclist, especially after turning off of some of the other similar streets that don't have the same treatment. Felt a lot less comfortable and safe, had a lot of close passes from cars. Whereas on San Rafael, I was given a lot of space and the speeds were a lot lower. So I was encouraged by what I saw. Definitely would like to see more data, but I hope that PBOT continues trying this out in more places. Thanks.
Thank you, Peter. And now we'll go to Sean Martinez.
Hi, I'm John Martinez. I'm with Tiger Transportation Advisory Committee and also Bike Loud PDX. And I appreciate
Sean, we can barely hear you. If maybe you can speak a little bit closer to your mic or louder.
Okay, can you hear me better now?
Yeah.
Okay. Sean Martinez, Tiger Transportation Advisory Committee and Bike Loud PDX. I appreciate PBOT for hosting this meeting. I wanted to bring up a movie called Motherload, which is all about riding cargo bikes. And we've got a cargo bike, electric cargo bike. We've got 14,000 miles on it, me and my 7-year-old, in the last 3 years. We have stopped driving. It's amazing. Look at Motherload. It's an awesome movie. But my question was about on the Southwest in Motion Plan, RP 28, Capitol Hill Road. I noticed that was not listed as a project that would be coming up soon. Thank you.
And Sean, you cut out a little bit through that through the comment, and the question mainly was hard to hear. We heard the comment, but the question was hard. If you could just write it on the chat, and that way we can actually track the question. And now I'm going to go over to John Miller.
It's on mute. Yeah, first of all, I was a little bit disappointed in how this all came about. I got a mailer talking about what they were going to do. The next thing, they're out putting striping down, and they didn't even have any input from anybody in the neighborhood. I live off of San Rafael on about 136, and I'm a contractor, and I do a lot of driving. And I know what the city of Portland's trying to do. They're trying to get everybody out of their cars, get them on bikes, and ride mass transit. Well, we all can't do that. This particular neighborhood had some of the highest per density of older people. Most of these older people, they aren't going to ride bikes. They can't ride bikes. They don't get on Zoom either, you know. And so you're not getting a real picture of the people that live in this neighborhood because you're doing a Zoom meeting. I'll guarantee you, if you had a meeting someplace here at one of the schools or a church or any place, you'd get a lot of old people that would be against what's going on. It's the most absurd idea that I've ever heard of. I think a lot of these people that have come here, you know, I grew up here in Oregon, and Oregon in Portland in general is not a place that I admire anymore. There's been too many people that have come here with too many crazy ideas, trying to change everything. They've taken a lot of our roads and made them more dangerous, not making them safer. We don't need a bike lane on every street in Portland.
Thank you, John. And we're going to go on to Mary Ann.
Great, thank you. So I also live in Southwest Portland and participated in Southwest in Motion. And other than Southwest Capitol Highway, it seems that the only improvements that we're getting anywhere in Southwest Portland is shoulders, either wide shoulders or multi-use paths, even on really busy streets. So given that scenario of shoulders are us, I was glad to see the criteria for traffic volumes and speeds, but I want to know if there's also a criteria for sight distance, particularly in hilly terrain, as in Southwest Portland. There's, you know, I share Keith Leiden's concerns that you may not be able to see the oncoming traffic or see people in the shoulders if there's limited sight distance. So I guess it's a comment to add sight distance to the criteria as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Ann. We'll go to Eric.
Hi, yeah, thanks. And again, thanks everybody for being here. I just wanted to bring up induced demand and the idea that we measure the number of cars on a street and then use that to decide what the cross section, what the design of that street would be, what the speed limit of that street would be, And I think that's backwards. If you design the street for high speeds, then people will drive at high speeds. If you make it narrow, they'll drive more slowly. I think the flaw in most of our advisory bike lanes has been too much width in the center lane and too few physical obstacles for drivers to have to slow down and negotiate. I don't want to be the only obstacle to the driver in that in the advisory bike lane. I want a physical thing that I can get behind if I hear somebody that's got their engine wound all the way up coming down the block. I also live in Southwest, and I carry my kids around, 2 of them on an electric cargo bike, and have done that since 2014. I've gotten my groceries that way. It's really just a matter of getting cars out of the way of the paths where people could use bikes to get around. And again, not everybody can drive, just like not everybody can ride a bike. So we can't force everybody to get into cars in order to do that. So the thing about Southwest, though, is that we do have a lot of those blind corners and crests and such. And so we need some physical obstacles to push cars into a single lane at that point, and maybe a stop sign if it's a place where they need to stop to safely negotiate that turn, corner, crest, whatever it is. You need to imagine that there are people using the street as you come over that crest, and engineer accordingly. You can't just stripe a yellow line down the center and figure that people will stay out of the way so that we can have 2 vehicles go over that crest at the same time. So that's just how it works. Thanks.
Thank you, Eric. And we'll go next to Danielle. Dina and Marty, I see your hands up. If you could please provide your comment or question on the chat so that we can record what they are. We're coming up on time, and I want to make sure that we get your comments and questions if there's additional ones. Danielle, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Danielle. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a representative from Oregon Walks. And I wanted to thank you, PBOT, for your creativity in this, because I know there are limited fundings when it comes to the city of Portland and transportation. Just as Oregon Walks, a pedestrian safety and advocacy organization, we do not believe that paint is protection fundamentally. So we hope to see this as a short-term solution rather than a long-term. And we are supportive of them as long as they are on low flow streets, and definitely not high flow where there's lots of cars. And so that's kind of where hesitant with some of the plans. But thank you again for allowing us to comment.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. As I mentioned, if you still have a comment or question you would like for us to record, please put it on the chat. We have been tracking the questions and comments that we've received so far in this period. And as I said, we will be posting those to the website, the project website that I have shared, and that I'm happy to share again to make sure everyone has access to it. Again, I just want to make sure that I say again, we're grateful that you all showed up today. This is not the only way that we're conducting engagement around the topic. We just wanted to make sure that we gave an opportunity that was easy and accessible, but there will be additional meetings, especially as projects are hitting the road on different parts of the city. There will be more project managers working with those communities to make sure that they get feedback from folks. As some folks mentioned, like Zoom and virtual is not the only way for us to hear from our neighbors, and we want to make sure that we're hearing from various perspectives on the city. And we know that technology is not the only way to do that, but it is a helpful one when trying to conduct this kind of engagement at a large scale. So again, you'll hear from us more. We hope to do things like this, not just for shoulder and advisory bike lanes, but also just for other topics that may be helpful to just create a bit of understanding on the why of something is taking place. This recording will also be available on that project website. And again, I just want to wish you all a good night and thank you for coming tonight. And here's that project website I promised in case you have any additional questions. Now that concludes our meeting, and I'll give you all one last chance. If there's a comment or question you want to drop into the chat, please do so now before I close the channel. And I want to give a shout out to my team. Thank you for all my colleagues to coming tonight too and presenting. It's been really helpful to hear from different perspectives as well. So wishing everyone a good night